principles of right hand pick style technique on the guitar. Number one, mostly straight wrist, but a 10-degree drop is okay, just by the nature of how we hold the instrument. For the right hand, if you are fully relaxing properly, gravity will tend to sort of pull this wrist angle down a little bit. So like this much drop from the wrist, this much downward arc is okay, but much more than that, like that, is bad, and so is anything in the opposite direction like that. So number one, mostly straight wrist, and that's mostly to avoid tendonitis, carpal tunnel syndrome, and also to increase blood flow to the hand. It's a health thing as much as it is a technique thing. Number two, relax your shoulders, also a health rule. Try to relax every muscle you're not using to play, but pay special attention to the shoulder because that will influence how the rest of the arm feels. Number three, anchor the wrist behind the bridge. Just like in fingerstyle, we need some sort of stability, some sort of fulcrum or something to pull or push against. And the way most advanced players find that stability when they use a pick is they anchor the blade of their hand, right, this part of the hand, behind the bridge somewhere, okay? Usually on an acoustic guitar, that will be the bridge pins, all right? Not only does this allow you stability so that you can pick back and forth. See, now here what I'm doing is this part of my wrist, sort of here sometimes, depending on which string I'm picking on, but that is still touching the guitar when I'm picking like this, and I'm rocking my wrist, sort of torquing it back and forth to get my pick motion. All right. So not only do I get this stability from that, but one thing it also allows me to do is transfer easily in and out of palm muting technique. So if I need to start palm muting very quickly, I can, and then I just come off the strings and I get right back out of it. So. Some players will try to get this stability by planting fingers on the guitar, other fingers besides the ones they're using to hold their pick. This is not something I recommend, even though some advanced players play like this. Wes Montgomery, his entire career, fingers on the guitar, played with only his thumb, and one of the best jazz guitarists that's ever lived. So take this with a grain of salt. But the reason I don't recommend this is because it limits your option for combining pick and fingerstyle technique. So eventually, if you want to combine these styles, okay, so sometimes I'm using fingers there, sometimes I'm using pick, and transferring in and out of those techniques is impossible if you're anchoring fingers on the guitar. So don't get the stability from anchoring fingers, get it from anchoring the wrist. All right. Last rule, number 4, sweep the pick back and forth. So what I mean by this is don't keep the pick at a rigid 90-degree angle to the string. Okay, what that's going to mean is when you play, you're going to allow the pick, when you down pick, to sort of angle downward. So that pick, when it goes through this string, I'm not just going to hold it rigidly here and just go boom. Okay, I'm going to let that string almost push the pick this way. Okay, now the pick is at a downward angle when I'm doing a downstroke. Okay, and then when I come backwards, the opposite thing will happen where I'm coming back to do an upstroke, and now my pick angle is radically this way. I'm exaggerating a little bit so that you can see, but this is the principle of motion. When I do this and I allow my pick to sort of flow with the string, it reduces the friction from the string so that I can get a more predictable release and I don't have to use as much force. So I'm holding the pick somewhat lightly so that I can allow it to do that sweeping. It's rather like the motion you use on a paintbrush or a broom. Okay, so that sweeping back and forth is very important to getting a loose hand and to getting a good predictable pick release. If you hold that pick too rigid, it's another mistake I see many beginners make. Tends to increase the amount of force you use to pick, and it's less predictable. So sometimes you get this situation where you're pressing, and then release. All right, and that's also bad. One thing you can do to mitigate that also is use just slightly less of the pick. this is really too much of that pick exposed. And that goes along with this rule about decreasing friction. Choke up on the pick a little bit. There is one exception to this. At very fast speeds, as you become a very advanced player, you'll notice that at top speeds, it's not really possible to allow that pick that much freedom, and you'll need to hold it more rigidly. I don't know if I'll be able to demonstrate this, but like anything that faster, anything that faster, that pick is really not doing that loosey-goosey thing I'm talking about. I'm really actually needing to maintain a harder angle there because I'm playing that fast. However, what happens when you play that fast also is the force from the pick decreases a lot. So you're sort of compensating by keeping the pick rigid but also decreasing the force. One last thing I'll say about more the wrist rule, but also this rule. There's plenty of times where the wrist comes up on the guitar and you're really using this sweeping motion back and forth, especially strumming. So my wrist is off the guitar, I'm not anchoring, and I'm really doing this flowing pick technique. All right, and then there's sometimes where you'll need to anchor the wrist and use something very rigid and the wrist anchored. These are the go-tos, okay? The go-to is anchor the wrist behind the bridge and let the pick flow, okay? And then mix in a more rigid pick grip and the wrist coming up when you need to. But always on the guitar, you want to have something that that subconsciously you can always just go to immediately, all right? And then when you need to alter or modify that technique, that's fine. But it's always important to have something that your body remembers how to do instantly in an unfamiliar situation, like when you're improvising. Okay, those are the rules of right hand pick style technique.